There is a moment, a quiet, heavy moment, when you realize you have been here before. You recognize the feeling. You recognize the pattern. You recognize the way things unfolded, almost like watching a replay of something you swore would never happen again. And in that moment, something inside you sinks. Because you thought this time would be different. You promised yourself it would be different. You worked so hard to make it different. And yet, here you are. Again. Maybe it is a relationship that keeps ending the same way, with the same kind of hurt, the same kind of person, the same silence where love used to be. Maybe it is a financial pattern. Money coming in, money slipping away, never quite getting ahead no matter how many times you try to start fresh. Maybe it is an emotional cycle. The anxiety that keeps returning, the depression that pulls you back under just when you thought you were finally above water. Maybe it is a behavioral pattern, something you keep doing even though you know better, even though you hate yourself for it, even though you have repented and cried and tried again. Cycles are one of the most exhausting things a human being can carry, not just because of what they do to your life, but because of what they do to your belief. Your belief that things can change, your belief that you can change, your belief that God is even listening anymore. If you are in a cycle right now, I need you to stay with me today, because what I want to talk about is not just how to break a pattern. I want to talk about what it actually takes, what it costs, and what faith has to do with any of it. Let's start with something that might be uncomfortable to hear. Most of us do not want to break the cycle as much as we think we do. Now, before you close this out, hear me. I'm not saying you do not want things to be better. I'm not saying you enjoy suffering. I'm not saying you are lazy or weak or hopeless. What I'm saying is that cycles, even painful ones, have a pull to them, a gravitational force that most people have never been taught to identify. And until you understand that pull, you will keep blaming yourself every time you return to the same place. Here is what cycles actually are at their root. They are familiar. And familiarity, no matter how painful it is, feels safe to the nervous system. Your body, your mind, your emotional wiring. They have learned that this pattern is survivable. They have learned how to brace for it, how to manage it, how to exist within it. And so, even when part of you is screaming to get out, another part of you knows exactly what to expect if you stay. And the unknown, the idea of something truly different, that part is terrifying. This is not weakness. This is biology. This is the way trauma conditions the human system to repeat what is familiar, because familiar, at least, has a track record. Familiar does not guarantee joy, but it guarantees survival. And for a lot of people, for a long time, survival is the only thing they knew how to aim for. So, when you beat yourself up for going back, when you shame yourself for repeating, when you wonder what is wrong with you, I want you to consider a different question. What has this cycle been protecting you from? What has it been keeping you from having to face? Because there is almost always something underneath the pattern. And faith begins, not with behavior change, but with the willingness to go down into that something. There is a kind of faith that most of us were taught that does not actually do anything about cycles. It is the faith of hoping, the faith of wishing, the faith of saying the right words and expecting the pattern to lift like a fog. You pray about it, you speak over it, you believe for breakthrough, and then Monday comes, and nothing has changed. So you try harder, you pray longer, you fast, you worship through the pain, and still, the same thing keeps happening. And then comes the most dangerous thought of all. Maybe faith does not work for me. I want to spend some real time here, because this is where so many people quietly exit, not loudly. They do not announce their departure from belief, they just start going through the motions. They show up, but they are not really present. They say the words, but they stopped expecting anything. They gave up on transformation and settled for maintenance. And if you are honest, you might recognize that place. The problem is not that faith does not work. The problem is that we were taught a version of faith that is essentially passive, a faith that waits for God to do everything while we stay unchanged. And that version of faith was never designed to break cycles, because cycles are not just spiritual problems. They are also deeply human ones. They live in your nervous system. They live in your thought patterns. They live in the choices you make before you even realize you are making them. And God, in all of his wisdom and love, will not override the humanity he placed inside you. He moves through it. He redeems it. But he does not erase it without your participation. Active faith, the kind that actually breaks cycles, looks completely different from passive hope. Active faith is terrifying and inconvenient, and it asks things of you that feel impossible. But it is the only kind that produces real, lasting change. So what does it actually look like to break a cycle through faith? Not the bumper sticker version, the real version. It starts with honesty that most people are not willing to have, not honesty with other people, though that matters too. Honesty with yourself, the kind that happens in a quiet room when there is no audience and no performance and nothing to protect. The kind of honesty where you stop explaining and start seeing, where you look at the pattern without the justifications layered on top of it, where you say, "This is what I keep doing, and I do not fully understand why, and I have been too afraid to find out." This is the doorway, and it is small, because the doorway into real transformation is not a grand moment. It is not a breakthrough service or a mountaintop experience or a word from a prophet. It is a quiet, private reckoning where you decide to stop lying to yourself. If you're in a financial cycle, honesty sounds like, "I spend when I'm anxious. I avoid looking at my bank account because what I find there makes me feel like a failure. I make impulsive decisions when I feel powerless in other areas of my life." That is honesty. That is the beginning. If you are in a relational cycle, honesty sounds like, "I choose people who need saving because I do not know how to be chosen without a role. I confuse intensity with love. I stay too long because leaving feels like abandonment, and I would rather be hurt than be the one who walks away." That is honesty. If you are in a cycle of self-sabotage, honesty sounds like, "Right before good things happen, I do something to ruin them, because somewhere deep down I do not believe I am allowed to have what I want. I believe good things always come with a price I eventually cannot pay." That is honesty. And when you get honest like that, when you say the thing out loud that has never had a name before, something shifts. Something that has been hiding in the dark gets exposed to light. And light, on its own, changes things. But honesty alone is not enough, because you can see a pattern clearly and still repeat it. Plenty of people have years of therapy and still run the same scripts. Plenty of people can articulate every root of every wound and still make the same choices on a Friday night. What has to happen after honesty is surrender. And I want to be very specific about what I mean by that, because surrender is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the life of faith. Surrender does not mean giving up. Surrender does not mean passivity. Surrender does not mean saying God will handle it while you do nothing. What surrender actually means is releasing the grip of control that your ego has over the outcome of your healing. It means stopping the management of your own image in the process of your transformation. It means allowing yourself to be seen in the middle of the mess, by God, and eventually by safe people, without having to have it all together first. Most people who are stuck in cycles are also deeply committed to the performance of not being stuck. They talk about their breakthrough before it happens because admitting they are still in the cycle feels like too much to bear. They post about their freedom while privately still fighting. They lead Bible studies on topics that are actively dismantling them. And that performance, that constant management of perception, is one of the primary reasons the cycle persists, because you cannot fully receive what you are pretending you already have. Surrender breaks the performance. It says, "I do not have this together. I am still in this. I do not know when I will be out. And I am choosing to trust something bigger than my ability to manage how this looks." That takes more courage than almost anything else I can describe. And it is one of the most profoundly faithful things a person can do. If you have been fighting something alone for a long time, if you have been white-knuckling through the same cycle, telling yourself you just need more willpower, more discipline, more prayer, more faith, I want you to hear something gently. You were not designed to do this alone. That is not a weakness. That is not a character flaw. That is the way you were made. Connection is not a bonus feature of the human experience. It is the core infrastructure of healing, and the enemy of every cycle knows that, which is why Isolation is almost always part of the cycle itself. Stay hidden, stay quiet, handle it yourself. Do not let anyone see how bad it actually is. Community is one of the most powerful forces for breaking patterns that exists, not because people can fix you, but because being truly known and still accepted rewires something in the brain. It creates new evidence. Evidence that contradicts the lie most cycles are built on. The lie that says you are fundamentally too much, not enough, damaged, unworthy, beyond repair. When someone sees the real version of you and stays, when someone knows your actual story and does not flinch, that is not just a nice feeling. That is healing happening. That is the cycle losing its grip. Because the cycle feeds on shame, and shame cannot survive being seen. If there is something in your life that no one knows the full truth about, that is not something to be proud of. I know it might feel like strength. I know it might feel like you are protecting people, or protecting your image, or just handling your own. But what it actually is loneliness. And loneliness is not where cycles break. Loneliness is where they live. There is also something that needs to be said about the role of time in this process, because we live in a culture that has made everyone allergic to it. We want fast. We want immediate. We want the prayer that works on the first try and the breakthrough that happens before the week is out. And when healing takes longer than that, when the cycle does not shatter the moment we decide to fight it, we interpret that as failure. We interpret that as abandonment. We go looking for a new strategy, a new method, a new church, a new something. Because surely the fact that it is taking this long means we are doing it wrong. But healing is not fast. Transformation is not fast. And cycles that took years, sometimes decades, to develop are not going to dissolve in a single tearful moment of surrender. They unravel, slowly, non-linearly, with setbacks that feel like failure but are actually part of the process. One of the most important things you can do for your own healing is to redefine what progress looks like. Progress is not the absence of struggle. Progress is the shortening of recovery time. Progress is catching yourself earlier in the pattern. Progress is choosing differently even when the old choice is screaming at you. Progress is staying in a conversation instead of shutting down. Progress is asking for help before you hit rock bottom instead of after. These are not small things. These are enormous. And if you have been dismissing them because they do not look like full deliverance, you have been missing the very evidence that God is moving in your life. I want to pause here and speak directly to someone. You have been through this cycle so many times that you have started to build your identity around it. You have started to believe that the pattern is who you are, that the anxiety is just your personality, that the relational dysfunction is just your love language, that the self-sabotage is just how you are wired. You have started to name yourself after the thing that is trying to destroy you. And I need you to hear this clearly. You are not your cycle. The pattern is something that happened to you, or something you learned, or something that developed in response to pain. But it is not the core of who you are. It is not the truest thing about you. And the moment you start to agree with it as your identity, you close the door on the very transformation that is being offered to you. You are allowed to believe that something different is possible for you, even if it has not happened yet, even if every attempt before this one has failed, even if the people in your life have stopped believing it. You are allowed to hold on to the possibility of a different story, not because you earned it, not because you have it all figured out, but because that is what faith is. Faith is not the evidence of what has already happened. Faith is the substance of what you are still believing for, in the face of everything that says otherwise. And that faith does not have to be loud. It does not have to be certain. It just has to be enough to take the next step. Let me talk about what the next step actually looks like in practice, because you might be sitting with everything we have talked about and thinking, okay, but what do I actually do? And that is the right question. Not what do I believe abstractly, but what do I do today, tomorrow, in the next moment when the cycle tries to pull me back? The first thing is this: build in a pause. Cycles thrive on automaticity. They are most powerful when you are operating on autopilot, when you are reacting without thinking, responding without choosing, going through the motions of the old pattern without even realizing you have stepped back into it. The pause is the interruption. It is the moment between stimulus and response where you remember that you have a choice. It sounds simple, it is profoundly difficult. But it is the hinge point of all behavioral change. The pause might look like stepping outside before you send the text. It might look like sleeping before you make the financial decision. It might look like calling someone before you go back to the thing you are trying to leave. It might look like writing down what you are feeling instead of acting on it immediately. The pause creates space. And in that space, something different becomes possible. The second thing is accountability that has teeth. Not accountability that is really just confession after the fact. Not accountability that is really just someone who listens without challenge. Real accountability is someone who knows your pattern well enough to name it before you repeat it. Someone who has permission to ask the hard questions. Someone who will not let you slide on the excuses you have used 100 times before. That kind of accountability is rare and uncomfortable and absolutely essential. The third thing is celebration of small wins. And I mean actually celebrating them, not dismissing them, not minimizing them with, well, I still have a long way to go. Celebrating them, acknowledging them, marking them. Because your brain learns by reward just as much as by consequence. And if the only time you pay close attention to the pattern is when you fail, you're reinforcing the failure as the primary story. But when you notice the moment you chose differently, when you name it, when you give it weight, when you let yourself feel the significance of it, you are building new neural pathways. You are literally rewiring the story your brain tells about who you are and what you are capable of. There is a lie that runs underneath most cycles that has to be called out directly. The lie says, if you were stronger, more disciplined, more spiritual, more committed, this would already be over. And that lie is doing more damage than the cycle itself, because it keeps you striving instead of healing. It keeps you performing instead of surrendering. It keeps you trying to fix yourself with the same self that created the pattern in the first place. And it keeps you from accessing the grace that is actually available to you. Not when you get it together, but right now, in the middle of the mess. You are not behind. You are not a hopeless case. The fact that you are still here, still trying, still seeking, that is not weakness. That is one of the most profound expressions of strength that exists. The people who have truly given up do not spend their time wondering how to get free. You are still in the fight, and that matters. The path forward does not require perfection. It requires presence. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to stay in the process, even when the process is slow and unglamorous and far less dramatic than the breakthrough moment you pictured. It requires faith, not the kind that shouts at the storm, but the kind that keeps walking through it, one quiet step at a time. As we come toward the close of this conversation, I want to leave you with something to sit with. Breaking a cycle is not a single event. It is 1,000 small decisions made in the direction of freedom. Some of those decisions will feel enormous. Most of them will feel invisible. The decision not to pick up the phone and call the person who hurts you. The decision to look at your bank account even when you are afraid of what you will find. The decision to say how you actually feel instead of performing strength. The decision to rest even when productivity is the only thing that makes you feel worthy. These are the decisions that change a life, not because they are dramatic, but because they are consistent. And here is what I want you to know about consistency when you are in a cycle. You are going to have bad days. You are going to stumble. You are going to find yourself 6 steps back thinking you have lost all the ground you gained. And in those moments, the most important thing you can do is not quit, not start over from scratch, not rewrite the entire story as failure. Just get back up and take one step, just one, and then another. Freedom from a cycle is not a destination you arrive at and then coast from. It is a practice, a daily, sometimes hourly, practice of choosing the life you are building over the life that is familiar. And the more you practice, the easier the practice becomes. Not easy, but easier. The grip loosens, the pull weakens. The old pattern starts to feel less like home and more like somewhere you used to live. That is what it looks like when a cycle breaks. Not a sudden silence. Not a dramatic moment of deliverance. Just a growing quiet in the place where the noise used to live. And one day, Not the day you expected. You realize the pull is not as strong as it was. You realize you have gone longer without going back than you ever have before. You realize you are different, genuinely, substantively different. And it happened. Not all at once, but in the 1,000 small moments you did not quit. Oti, if something in this conversation stirred something in you, if there is a cycle you have been carrying that you have never said out loud, I want to encourage you to do something today, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today, reach out to someone safe. Write it down. Say the thing you have been afraid to say. Take the first step toward honesty. You do not need a plan. You just need to start. And if you are someone who has been walking this path for a long time already, someone who has been in the work, who has been doing the hard, quiet, unglamorous business of healing, I want to say this to you directly. I see you. What you are doing matters. The ground you have gained is real, even when it does not feel like it. Do not give up on the story that is still being written. You were never meant to stay in the cycle. You were meant for more than repetition. You were meant for the kind of life that moves, that grows, that surprises you with its capacity for beauty and redemption and new beginnings. That life is not behind you. It is not reserved for someone else. It is still ahead, waiting for you on the other side of the next honest step. Take it. You have everything you need to begin.